The hallways of Pine Grove High School were always noisy before the bell rang. Students rushed past each other, some laughing, some half asleep, all of them heading to their first class of the day. In this chaos, May walked with her eyes down, trying not to bump into anyone. She'd only been at this school for 3 weeks and she still felt like a ghost, present but unseen. May clutched her worn backpack tighter as she slipped into the music room. It was her favorite place in the whole school despite everything. She loved the smell of wood and metal from the instruments, the scattered sheets of music, and the quiet moments before everyone arrived when she could just sit and breathe. Today she was first to arrive as usual. May chose her regular spot in the back corner and took out her notebook. She didn't have any friends yet, but that was okay. Back home in her small town, before her family had to move for her dad's new job, she'd been known as the quiet girl who played piano. Here she was just the quiet girl. Nobody knew about the music yet. Ms. Rivera, the music teacher, smiled at her from the piano at the front of the room. "Good morning, May. How are you today?" "I'm good, thank you," May answered softly. Ms. Rivera was nice. She never forced May to speak up in class or called on her unexpectedly. The room began filling up as more students arrived. May watched as they came in groups, talking about weekend plans and complaining about homework. She recognized the regulars. Zoe and her friends always sat at the front, their instrument cases decorated with stickers and ribbons. They were all part of the school orchestra and never missed a chance to mention it. "Did you hear about the showcase?" Zoe's voice carried across the room. "My mom's getting me a new dress for my solo." "You're so lucky," her friend Lisa replied. "Mr. Chen said my piece still needs work, but I think he's being too picky." May's ears perked up at the mention of a showcase. She loved watching performances, even if the thought of being on stage herself made her stomach twist into knots. The final bell rang, and Ms. Rivera clapped her hands for attention. "Good morning, everyone. Before we start today's lesson, I have an exciting announcement." The class quieted down, and May noticed how even the usually distracted students looked interested. "The school board has approved our proposal for a special spring music showcase," Ms. Rivera continued. "This will be different from our regular concerts. We're looking for solo performances that demonstrate exceptional skill and creativity." Excited whispers broke out across the room. May felt a tiny flutter in her chest, a feeling she hadn't experienced since before the move. "Auditions will be held next Friday after school," Ms. Rivera explained. "You can perform any piece you choose, but it should be something that truly shows your abilities. This is open to all students, not just those currently in orchestra or band." Zoe raised her hand. "Will there be judges? How many students will be selected?" "Good questions," Ms. Rivera nodded. "We'll have a panel of 3 judges, myself, Mr. Chen from the Community Music School, and Mrs. Washington from the school board. We're planning to select 5 performances for the showcase." As Ms. Rivera went on to explain more details, May found herself thinking about her grandmother's piano. It had been sold when they moved, too big and too expensive to bring along. She hadn't touched a piano in nearly 2 months now, the longest she'd gone without playing since she was 6 years old. The thought made her chest ache. Playing piano had been her escape, her comfort, her way of saying things she couldn't put into words. Now it was just another thing she'd lost in the move. Class continued, and May took notes on music theory as Ms. Rivera explained key signatures. When the bell rang, students packed up quickly, chatting about the showcase and what pieces they might perform. "Remember to sign up on the sheet by the door if you're interested in auditioning," Ms. Rivera called out as they left. May lingered, watching as Zoe and her friends crowded around the sign-up sheet. She waited until they had left before approaching the piano where Ms. Rivera was organizing sheet music. "Ms. Rivera?" Her voice came out smaller than she intended. The teacher looked up with a warm smile.
"Yes, May?"
"The showcase," May started, then paused, gathering courage. "Is it really open to everyone?" "Absolutely," Ms. Rivera assured her. "Are you thinking of auditioning?" May fidgeted with the strap of her backpack. "I used to play piano, but we had to sell ours when we moved. I haven't practiced in a while." Something softened in Ms. Rivera's expression. "The music room is open during lunch and after school until 4:30. You're welcome to use the piano to practice." "Really?" May couldn't keep the hope from her voice. "Of course. Do you have sheet music?" May nodded. "Some. My grandmother gave me her old books before we left." "Perfect. Why don't you come by tomorrow during lunch? I'd love to hear you play." The next day, May's hands trembled as she approached the music room. She'd spent the night looking through her grandmother's old music books, trying to decide what to play. In the end, she chose the piece she knew best, the one she could play even when nervous. The room was empty except for Ms. Rivera eating lunch at her desk. She looked up and smiled when May entered. "I was hoping you'd come," she said, closing her lunch container. "The piano's all yours." May set her backpack down and took out the worn music book. The pages were yellowed with age and marked with her grandmother's careful notations. She sat at the piano bench, adjusting its height and distance from the keys. Taking a deep breath, she placed her fingers on the cool ivory and began to play. The first few notes came out hesitantly. The piano was different from her grandmother's, the keys requiring a firmer touch. But soon muscle memory took over. Her fingers remembered what her mind had feared forgotten. Ms. Rivera watched in silence as May played through the piece, a Chopin nocturne that started gently before building to an emotional middle section. When May finished, she kept her eyes on the keys, afraid to look up. "May," Ms. Rivera's voice was quiet. "That was beautiful." May finally looked up, surprised to see genuine amazement in her teacher's eyes. "How long have you been playing?" "Since I was 6, May answered. "My grandmother taught me at first, then I had lessons with Mr. Wu in our town." Ms. Rivera leaned forward. "You must sign up for the showcase auditions. You have a rare gift." The compliment made May's cheeks warm. "I don't know. It's been a while and I'm not sure I'm good enough." "You are more than good enough," Ms. Rivera insisted. "Promise me you'll think about it?" May nodded, though inside she was unsure. Playing alone with Ms. Rivera was one thing. Playing in front of judges and other students, especially students like Zoe who had been taking lessons for years, was something else entirely. For the next week, May came to the music room every lunch period to practice. Sometimes Miss Rivera was there, sometimes not. Either way, May lost herself in the music, making up for the weeks without a piano. Her fingers grew stronger again, more confident on the keys. She hadn't signed the audition sheet yet. On Thursday, the day before auditions, May arrived at the music room to find it wasn't empty. Zoe and 3 of her friends were there, gathered around the piano. They stopped talking when May walked in. "Sorry," May mumbled, turning to leave. "Wait," Zoe called out. "You're May, right?" The new girl. May nodded, uncomfortable under the stares of the group. "Ms. Rivera says you come here to practice," Zoe continued. "Do you play?" "A little," May answered, her voice barely audible. One of Zoe's friends, Ava, May thought her name was, snickered. "Are you auditioning tomorrow?" I'm not sure yet." "You should," Zoe said, though her smile didn't reach her eyes. "We'd all love to hear you play." Something about the way she said it made May's stomach tighten. The other girls exchanged glances that May couldn't quite read. "Maybe," May said, backing toward the door. "I forgot something in my locker. I'll come back later." She hurried out, her heart pounding. She didn't go back to the music room that day. Instead, she sat alone in the library, thinking about her grandmother's words the day they'd sold the piano. "Music isn't in the instrument, May. It's in you. No one can take that away." That night, May took out the sign-up sheet she'd picked up days ago but hadn't filled out. With a shaky hand, she wrote her name and the title of her piece. Tomorrow after school, she would audition. What was the worst that could happen? They might laugh, but she had been laughed at before. At least this time it would be while doing something she loved. She folded the paper carefully and put it in her backpack, next to her grandmother's music book. For the first time since moving to Pine Grove, May fell asleep without that empty feeling in her chest. Tomorrow she would play again, really play with all her heart. And that was enough. Friday arrived with gray skies and the threat of rain. May woke up earlier than usual, her stomach tight with nerves. She checked her backpack 3 times before leaving her room, making sure the sign-up sheet and her grandmother's music book were safely tucked inside. "You're up early," her mother commented as May entered the kitchen. She was already dressed for work, hair pulled back neatly, making lunch for May's younger brother Tao. "Big day," May said, pouring herself a glass of water. She hadn't told her parents about the audition yet. What if she changed her mind at the last minute? What if she signed up but couldn't make herself walk into the room when the time came? Her mother gave her a curious look but didn't press. That was one good thing about being the quiet child. People didn't always expect explanations. "Dad had to leave early for his meeting," her mother said, "but he should be home for dinner tonight." Maybe we could order pizza? May nodded, trying to appear normal despite the butterflies in her stomach. Sounds good. The walk to school felt longer than usual. May rehearsed the piece in her head, her fingers moving slightly at her sides as if playing invisible keys. A couple of other students gave her odd looks, but she barely noticed. The first half of the day passed in a blur. May couldn't focus on her lessons, her mind constantly drifting to the audition. By lunchtime, her nerves were so bad that she couldn't eat the sandwich her mother had packed. Instead, she went straight to the music room. To her relief, it was empty. May sat at the piano and played through her piece once, quietly, just to feel the keys under her fingers. Then she closed the cover and just sat there, trying to calm her racing heart. "You can do this," she whispered to herself, her grandmother's words echoing in her mind. "The music is in you." The afternoon classes dragged on forever. When the final bell rang, May gathered her things slowly, her legs feeling wobbly as she made her way to the music room. The hallway outside was already crowded with students waiting for their turn to audition. May joined the line, standing apart from the others. She recognized most of them from music class. Zoe was near the front, chatting confidently with the others, her violin case polished and decorated with stickers from music camps and competitions. Other students carried flutes, clarinets, and one boy even had a small keyboard. May was one of the only students without an instrument. The school piano would have to do. Ms. Rivera came out of the music room with a clipboard. "All right, everyone, we're ready to begin. We'll go in order of the sign-up sheet. Remember, you'll have 5 minutes to perform your piece, and then the judges may ask you a few questions." She started reading names from her list. "Zoe Chen, Daniel Park, Lee Nguyen." May listened anxiously, waiting for her name. It came near the end. May Wu. As the first students began their auditions, May stood against the wall trying to stay calm. One by one, they entered the room, performed, and came out again, some looking pleased, others disappointed. Zoe emerged looking confident, giving high fives to her friends. "They loved my Vivaldi piece," she announced loudly. "Mr. Chen said my technique has really improved since last year." The line moved forward gradually. May found herself chewing on her lower lip, a habit her grandmother had always gently corrected. The memory made her smile slightly, easing her nerves for a moment. Then Ava, one of Zoe's friends, spotted her. "Hey, you're actually here," she said, nudging the girl next to her. "I didn't think you'd show up." May nodded without speaking. "What are you playing?" asked the other girl, whose name May couldn't remember. "Chopin," May answered quietly. "Nocturne in E-flat major." Ava's eyebrows rose. "Seriously? That's like really advanced. Have you even played it for anyone before?" Before May could answer, Zoe joined them. "Oh, you actually signed up," she said, looking May up and down. "I'm surprised. You seemed so scared yesterday." "I'm still scared," May admitted, seeing no point in pretending. Something flickered in Zoe's expression, surprise perhaps at May's honesty. "Well, good luck, I guess. The judges are pretty strict." As more students finished their auditions, the hallway gradually emptied. May found herself alone with just a few others waiting their turn. Her palms were sweaty, and she wiped them repeatedly on her jeans. Finally, Ms. Rivera appeared at the door. "May Wu?" This was it. May took a deep breath and followed the teacher into the room. Inside, the setup was different from normal classes. 3 tables had been placed at the front, where the judges sat with evaluation sheets. Mr. Chen, whom she recognized from posters around the music room, nodded politely at her. Mrs. Washington, an older woman with silver-rimmed glasses, gave her an encouraging smile. Several students had stayed to watch the auditions, including Zoe and her friends, who sat in the back row whispering to each other. May felt her confidence wavering at the sight of them. "Whenever you're ready," Ms. Rivera said, taking her seat with the other judges. May approached the piano slowly. She adjusted the bench, her hands trembling visibly. From the back of the room came a muffled giggle, followed by a whispered shh. Ignoring them, May placed her music book on the stand. The familiar, worn pages with her grandmother's handwritten notes gave her a small measure of comfort. She took a moment to center herself, then placed her hands on the keys. Another giggle from the back. Someone whispered something she couldn't hear, followed by more stifled laughter. May's face burned with embarrassment. She couldn't look up, couldn't bear to see their expressions. Why had she thought she could do this? She hadn't played for an audience in months and never for strangers who were already judging her. Her fingers hovered above the keys, frozen. The silence in the room grew heavy, uncomfortable. Mrs. Washington shifted in her seat. Mr. Chen cleared his throat quietly. "Take your time," Ms. Rivera said gently. From the back came another whisper. "Bet she can't even play." Something shifted in May at those words. A spark of defiance lit somewhere deep inside her. She thought of her grandmother, who had played through air raids during war, who had taught piano lessons even when her arthritis made her fingers stiff and painful, who had told May, when words fail, let the music speak. May took a deep breath and began to play. The first notes were soft, hesitant, a reflection of her own uncertainty. But as her fingers remembered their path across the keys, muscle memory took over. The gentle, dreamlike melody of Chopin's Nocturne filled the room, each note clear and purposeful. May forgot about the judges, forgot about Zoe and her friends, forgot about her nervousness. There was only the music now, the rise and fall of the melody, the delicate ornamentations, the way the harmonies shifted like clouds changing shape. As she moved into the middle section, her confidence grew. Her body swayed slightly with the music, her fingers dancing across the keys with increasing assurance. The piece built in emotion, and May let herself feel everything she'd been holding back since the move. The sadness of leaving her home, the loneliness of being the new girl, the grief of selling her grandmother's piano. The whispering in the back of the room had stopped. The entire room was silent except for the piano. When May reached the final section, returning to the gentle theme from the beginning, she played with a newfound clarity and peace. The last notes hung in the air like a question waiting to be answered, then silence. May finally looked up, expecting to see boredom or confusion on the faces watching her. Instead, what she saw made her breath catch in her throat. Mrs. Washington had taken off her glasses and was dabbing at the corner of her eye with a tissue. Mr. Chen was leaning forward, his expression intense and focused. Ms. Rivera was smiling, a look of pride and something like vindication on her face, and in the back row, Zoe and her friends sat completely still, their earlier smirks replaced by expressions of disbelief. "May," Mr. Chen said, breaking the silence. "How long have you been playing piano?" "Since I was 6, she answered, her voice stronger than it had been all day. "My grandmother taught me." "And your grandmother's name?" he asked, something flickering in his eyes. "Lin Wu," May replied. Mr. Chen's eyebrows shot up. "Lin Wu from the Shanghai Conservatory? She was your teacher?" May nodded, surprised. "She's my father's mother." A murmur ran through the room. Even Mrs. Washington looked impressed, though she clearly didn't recognize the name as Mr. Chen had. "Well," Ms. Rivera said, making a note on her clipboard. "Thank you for your audition, May. We'll be posting the showcase selections on Monday morning." May closed her music book and stood up, legs still a bit shaky, but for entirely different reasons now. As she walked toward the door, she passed by Zoe's row. The girl who had been laughing earlier now stared at her with wide eyes. "That was—" Zoe started, then stopped, seeming at a loss for words. May gave her a small smile and continued walking. For the first time since coming to Pine Grove High School, she held her head high as she stepped into the hallway, her grandmother's music book clutched tightly to her chest. The weekend passed in a blur for May. At dinner Friday night, she finally told her parents about the audition. Her father's eyes had lit up with pride when she mentioned Mr. Chen recognizing grandmother Lin's name. "Did you tell him she taught at the conservatory for 30 years? He asked, reaching for another slice of pizza. "No, he just knew," May said, still surprised by that moment. "He seemed impressed." "Of course he was impressed," her mother said, gently wiping sauce from little Tao's chin. "You played beautifully." "I'm sure of it," May smiled but said nothing. She wasn't sure if she'd made it into the showcase yet. 5 spots, Ms. Rivera had said, and there had been at least 20 students auditioning. Many of them had years of lessons and experience performing. Zoe had been taking violin since she was 4, according to the whispers May had heard. Still, something had changed inside her during that audition. Even if she didn't make the showcase, she'd found her music again. That night before bed, she called her grandmother in China, telling her about playing the Nocturne for Mr. Chen. "I was so nervous at first, Nai, May admitted. Some girls were laughing at me." Her grandmother's voice, though crackling with static from the long-distance call, was warm and firm. "And then what happened? I started playing and everything else just faded away." "Good," her grandmother said simply. "That's how it should be. The music is bigger than the fear, yes?" "Yes," May agreed, smiling into the phone. "The music is bigger." Monday morning arrived with heavy rain that drummed against classroom windows and turned the schoolyard into a maze of puddles. May hurried inside, shaking water from her jacket. She'd almost convinced herself that it didn't matter if she made the showcase or not. But her heart still beat faster as she approached the music room. A small crowd had gathered around the bulletin board outside, where a single sheet of paper had been posted. May hung back, watching as students pushed forward to check the list, then moved away with either excitement or disappointment written on their faces. Zoe emerged from the crowd with a triumphant smile, high-fiving her friends. "Second spot," she announced, right after Daniel. May waited until most of the crowd had dispersed before approaching the list. Taking a deep breath, she looked at the 5 names typed neatly under the heading, Spring Music Showcase Performers. Daniel Park, piano, Beethoven's Pathétique Sonata, first movement, 2. Zoe Chen, violin, Vivaldi's Summer, third movement. Mei Wu, piano, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, Opninder number 2.4. Hiro Tanaka, cello, Bach's Cello Suite No. 1, Prelude 5. Lisa Nguyen, flute, Debussy's Syrinx. May stared at her name, hardly believing it was real. Third spot, she'd made it. "Congratulations," said a voice beside her. May turned to find Ms. Rivera smiling at her. Mr. Chen was particularly impressed. He said your technique reminds him of your grandmother's. "Really?" May couldn't hide her surprise. "He knew her playing?" Ms. Rivera nodded. "He studied at the conservatory years ago. He asked me to tell you he'd be honored to work with you on your piece for the showcase if you're interested. We have 4 weeks to prepare and he's offering free coaching sessions to all 5 performers. That would be—" May searched for the right word. "Amazing. Thank you." As Ms. Rivera walked away, May felt someone else approach. It was Zoe, without her usual group of friends. "So you made it," Zoe said, her tone difficult to read. "Congratulations, I guess." "You too," May replied cautiously. Zoe shifted from one foot to the other, looking uncomfortable. "Look, about Friday, we were kind of mean. I didn't know you could play like that." It wasn't exactly an apology, but May could see it was difficult for Zoe to say even this much. "It's okay." "No, it's not," Zoe admitted, surprising May. "We shouldn't have laughed. It's just, you never said anything about playing piano and then you picked one of the hardest pieces." May shrugged. "I've been playing it since I was 11. My grandmother taught me." "Your grandmother must be amazing," Zoe said, genuine admiration in her voice now. "Mr. Chen couldn't stop talking about her after your audition. He told us she was like a legend at the conservatory." May felt a flush of pride. She is pretty amazing. An awkward silence fell between them. Finally, Zoe spoke again. "A bunch of us get together on Thursdays after school to practice. You should come." Before May could respond, the warning bell rang, signaling 5 minutes until first period. "I need to go," Zoe said quickly. "But think about Thursday, okay?" May nodded, watching as Zoe hurried down the hallway. The invitation felt like the first crack in the wall that had separated her from the other students since her arrival at Pine Grove. The next few weeks transformed May's school experience. Suddenly, she wasn't invisible anymore. Other students in music class nodded to her or smiled in recognition. A few even asked about her grandmother, curious about the woman who had impressed Mr. Chen so much. The coaching sessions with Mr. Chen became the highlight of May's week. He was strict but kind, pushing her to bring out emotions in the music she hadn't fully explored before. "This nocturne," he explained during their second session, "is not just pretty sounds. Chopin wrote it when he was far from home, missing Poland. There is beauty, yes, but also longing. Homesickness, you understand this feeling, don't you?" May thought of her old home, her friends, her grandmother. "Yes," she said softly. "I understand." "Then put that in your playing," Mr. Chen urged. "Don't just play the notes. Play the feeling behind them." Each time they worked together, May felt her connection to the music deepen. She practiced daily, sometimes at school during lunch, sometimes at home on a small keyboard her parents had surprised her with after she made the showcase. It wasn't her grandmother's grand piano, but it was enough to keep her fingers limber and her skills sharp. True to her word, May joined Zoe and the others for Thursday practice sessions. At first it was awkward. She sat quietly, listening as they played their pieces and gave each other feedback. But gradually she began to offer suggestions when asked, and sometimes they asked for her opinion on phrasing or dynamics. "You have a good ear," Lisa said one day after May had suggested a different breathing point in her flute piece. "I didn't realize that was making it sound choppy." 3 weeks before the showcase, Zoe invited May to her house to practice together. May was surprised. They weren't exactly friends yet, more like friendly acquaintances. Still, she accepted the invitation. Zoe's house was large and modern, with a spacious music room containing both a piano and Zoe's violin setup. Photos of Zoe at various competitions lined one wall, along with certificates and ribbons. "My parents are kind of intense about music," Zoe explained, noticing May looking at the display. They both played in university. "It's impressive," May said honestly. They practiced separately at first, then took turns giving each other feedback. May was surprised to find that Zoe took criticism well, immediately trying to implement suggestions about the emotional quality of her Vivaldi piece. As they took a break with glasses of lemonade, Zoe asked the question May had been waiting for. "Why didn't you tell anyone you could play like that? You could have been in orchestra from day one." May stared into her glass. "We had to sell our piano when we moved. Dad's new job pays less than his old one. I guess I thought I wouldn't play again for a long time." Zoe was quiet for a moment. "That must have been hard." "It was," May admitted. "The piano was my grandmother's. She gave it to us when she moved to a smaller apartment. It felt like losing part of her." "But you still have her music," Zoe pointed out, nodding toward May's worn music book. "And her teaching," May smiled slightly. "Yeah, I still have that." As the showcase drew closer, May's confidence grew. The piece that had once felt like a memory of her old life now felt like a bridge to her new one. Mr. Chen's coaching had helped her find depths in the music she hadn't explored before, and practicing with the other students had given her a sense of belonging she'd been missing. The night before the showcase, May couldn't sleep. She lay awake, playing the piece in her mind, feeling both nervous and excited. Her phone buzzed with a text message, unusual for so late at night. It was from Zoe. "Nervous about tomorrow?" May texted back, "Yes, you?" "Terrified," came the reply, "but also excited. We're going to be amazing." "We." The word made May smile. Somehow, in just a few weeks, she had gone from being completely alone to being part of a we. She fell asleep thinking of tomorrow, of the music she would play, of her grandmother's words. "The music is in you. No one can take that away." The morning of the showcase arrived with clear skies and spring sunshine that streamed through May's bedroom window. She woke early, her stomach already tight with nerves. Today was the day. After 4 weeks of practice and preparation, she would perform her Chopin nocturne on a real stage, in front of a real audience. "May." "Breakfast," her mother called from downstairs. May slipped on her robe and headed to the kitchen where her family was already gathered. Her father was reading something on his phone, while her mother flipped pancakes at the stove. Little Tao sat with syrup already smeared across his cheeks, grinning at her. "The piano girl is awake," he announced, using his new nickname for her. Her father looked up with a smile. "Big day today. How are you feeling?" "Nervous," May admitted, sitting down at the table. "My stomach feels weird." Her mother set a plate of pancakes in front of her. "Eat something. It will help." May looked doubtfully at the food but took a small bite to please her mother. To her surprise, it did settle her stomach a bit. "I have news," her father said, setting down his phone. "Guess who's coming to the showcase tonight?" May looked up, curious. "Who?" "Grandmother Lynn." The fork slipped from May's fingers, clattering against her plate. "Nai-Nai?" "But she's in China." Her father shook his head, smiling wider now. "Not anymore. She flew in yesterday to surprise you. She's staying at Uncle Wei's house." "Why didn't you tell me?" May asked, stunned. "Because it was supposed to be a surprise," her father said. "She wanted to see you play on a stage again. I was going to wait until after school to tell you, but I thought maybe knowing she'll be there might help with the nerves." May wasn't sure if the news made her more nervous or less. Her grandmother had always been her biggest supporter, but also her most honest critic. The thought of playing for her tonight after months apart made May's heart race. "Can I call her?" she asked. Her father nodded. After breakfast. She's still adjusting to the time difference. At school, the day dragged endlessly. May could hardly focus on her classes, her mind constantly returning to the evening ahead. The showcase was scheduled for 7 o'clock, but performers needed to arrive by 5:30 for a final rehearsal on stage. During lunch, she found herself sitting with Zoe, Lisa, and the other showcase performers, something that would have seemed impossible just a month ago. "I couldn't sleep at all," Lisa confessed, pushing her lunch tray away barely touched. "I kept dreaming I showed up with the wrong instrument." "I dreamed I walked on stage in my pajamas," Daniel added, making the others laugh. "What about you, May?" Hero asked. "Any weird dreams?" May shook her head. "No, but my grandmother flew in from China to surprise me. She'll be in the audience tonight." "The famous grandmother?" Zoe's eyes widened. "That's so cool, but also terrifying." "Tell me about it," May agreed. "She's the one who taught me everything I know." After school, May went home to rest and change before the showcase. She'd chosen a simple dark blue dress that had been a gift from her grandmother the previous year. It still fit perfectly, and the color made her feel calm. Her grandmother called while she was getting ready. "May, May," came the familiar voice, using the childhood nickname that always made May smile. "Your father says you were surprised." "Very surprised," May admitted. "I can't believe you came all this way." "I would not miss it," her grandmother said firmly. "When your father told me about the showcase, I knew I had to be there. It has been too long since I heard you play." "I'm nervous," May confessed. "What if I make mistakes?" Her grandmother made a dismissive sound. "Everyone makes mistakes. That is not what matters. What matters is how you make the audience feel. If they forget themselves while listening to you, then you have succeeded, mistakes or no mistakes." They talked for a few more minutes before May had to finish getting ready. Her grandmother's words stayed with her, settling her nerves. Make the audience forget themselves. That was what she would try to do. The family arrived at the school auditorium at exactly 5:30. May's heart jumped when she saw her grandmother waiting in the lobby. Smaller than she remembered, her hair now completely silver, but with the same sharp eyes and straight posture that had always commanded respect from her students. "Nai Nai." May rushed forward to embrace her. Her grandmother held her tight for a moment, then stepped back to look at her. "The blue dress. Good choice. It brings calm to both you and the audience." Ms. Rivera appeared, clipboard in hand. "Performers backstage, please. Family members, you'll need to take your seats in 15 minutes. May gave her grandmother one more quick hug before following the other students backstage. The next hour passed in a blur of last-minute instructions, sound checks, and nervous chatter among the performers. Peeking through the curtains, May could see the auditorium filling up. She spotted her family in the third row, her grandmother sitting straight-backed between her parents, little Tao fidgeting already. 5 minutes, the stage manager announced. May's hands were cold. She rubbed them together, trying to warm her fingers before playing. Daniel, who would perform first, was pacing back and forth, silently moving his fingers as if playing an invisible piano. Ms. Rivera gathered them in a circle. "You've all worked incredibly hard. Tonight is about sharing your music, not about being perfect. Enjoy this moment." Then it was time. The lights dimmed in the auditorium, and Ms. Rivera walked onto the stage to welcome the audience and introduce the showcase. May listened from the wings, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. Daniel went on first. From backstage, May could hear his confident performance of Beethoven, the powerful chords filling the auditorium. The audience applauded enthusiastically when he finished, and he came off stage looking relieved and happy. "They're a good audience," he whispered to the others. "Very responsive." Next was Zoe with her Vivaldi piece. The fast technical passages of Summer sounded flawless, and May found herself smiling at how much emotion Zoe had added since they first practiced together. More applause followed, and then it was May's turn. "You'll be amazing," Zoe whispered as they passed each other. The stage lights felt warm as May walked to the piano. The auditorium seemed enormous from this angle, hundreds of faces looking back at her. She spotted her grandmother sitting perfectly still, watching intently. May adjusted the piano bench and took a moment to center herself, just as she had during the audition. But this time there was no fear, no whispers or giggles from the back of the room, only expectant silence. She placed her hands on the keys and began to play. The opening notes of the nocturne floated out over the audience, gentle, questioning, like the beginning of a story. May felt the music flow through her, more naturally than ever before. Each phrase connected to the next with a sense of inevitability, as if the music were playing itself through her. As the piece developed, building toward its emotional center, May thought of all that had happened in the past months. The move, the loneliness, the moment in the audition when everything changed. She poured these feelings into the music, letting the piano sing of homesickness and hope, of endings and beginnings. For those few minutes, she forgot about the audience, forgot about her nervousness. There was only Chopin's beautiful melody and the joy of bringing it to life. When the final notes faded, May remained still for a moment, her hands resting lightly on the keys. Then she looked up. The audience sat in complete silence. For one terrible second, May thought they hadn't liked her performance. Then, as if a spell had been broken, they erupted in applause. People rose to their feet, clapping enthusiastically. May could see her father whistling with his fingers in his mouth the way her mother always scolded him for. Tao jumping up and down on his seat, and her mother wiping tears from her cheeks. And her grandmother, her strict, composed grandmother, was standing with the rest, applauding with uncharacteristic vigor, her eyes shining with unmistakable pride. May stood and bowed, her legs shaky but her heart soaring. As she walked off stage, she caught Ms. Rivera's eye. The teacher gave her a subtle thumbs up before turning to introduce Hiro, the next performer. "That was incredible," Lisa whispered when May joined them in the wings. "I've never heard it played like that." "You made Mrs. Washington cry," added Daniel, pointing to where the school board member was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. May couldn't stop smiling. It felt different this time, better somehow. "It's because you weren't playing for the judges anymore," Zoe said thoughtfully. "You were playing for yourself." May considered this as they listened to Hiro's beautiful cello performance, followed by Lisa's delicate rendering of Debussy's Syrinx. Both received enthusiastic applause, though May noticed with a small thrill that her ovation had been the loudest. After the showcase ended, the audience mingled with the performers in the lobby. May found herself surrounded by people offering congratulations, including several of her teachers who seemed surprised to discover this hidden talent in their quiet new student. Then the crowd parted, and her grandmother stood before her. "Nai-Nai," May began, suddenly nervous again. "How was it?" Her grandmother regarded her seriously. "You played like yourself tonight." "Not like me, not like your teacher, like May." That is the greatest achievement. It was the highest praise her grandmother had ever given her. May felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "I've missed you so much," she whispered, stepping forward into her grandmother's embrace. "I've missed you too," her grandmother said softly. "But listening to you tonight, I realized something. You don't need me anymore, not as a teacher. You've found your own voice." "I'll always need you," May protested. Her grandmother smiled. "As family, yes, always, but as a musician, you are standing on your own feet now." Over her grandmother's shoulder, May saw Zoe approaching hesitantly, clearly not wanting to interrupt the moment. "Grandmother, there's someone I'd like you to meet," May said, wiping away her tears. "This is my friend Zoe." 3 months had passed since the spring showcase, and summer was in full bloom. May sat at her grandmother's piano, yes, her grandmother's piano, running her fingers lightly over the keys. It still seemed impossible that it was here, in their new living room, its rich mahogany gleaming in the afternoon sunlight. After the showcase, her grandmother had stayed for 2 weeks instead of the planned 3 days. During that time, she had visited May's school, met her teachers, and even given an impromptu masterclass that had the entire music department buzzing for days. But the biggest surprise came the day before her grandmother was scheduled to return to China. The family had gathered for a special dinner when Grandmother Lin announced her decision. "I'm selling my apartment in Shanghai," she'd said calmly, as if discussing the weather. "I've already spoken with your Uncle Wei about staying with him for a while, until I find a small place of my own. Here, in this city." The stunned silence that followed was broken by little Tao. "You're going to live here? Forever?" "Not forever," their grandmother had laughed. "But for now, yes. I have one more student to finish teaching." She'd looked directly at May then. "But I thought you said I found my own voice," May had reminded her, confused but hopeful. "Finding it is only the beginning," her grandmother had replied. "Now you must develop it." A week later, A moving truck had arrived with select belongings from her grandmother's Shanghai apartment, including the piano that May had played throughout her childhood, the one they'd been forced to sell during the move. How? May had asked, watching in disbelief as movers carefully positioned the instrument in their living room. I never sold it, her father confessed. Your grandmother convinced me to put it in storage instead. It was supposed to be a surprise for your birthday, but after the showcase, now months later, the piano had become the heart of their home again. Me practiced daily, working through increasingly challenging pieces under her grandmother's watchful guidance. The small keyboard her parents had bought was passed down to Tao, who showed surprising interest in learning to play. Most surprising of all was how May's life at school had transformed. After the showcase, Ms. Rivera had asked her to join the advanced orchestra for the following year. She'd been hesitant at first. Piano was her instrument, not orchestra instruments, but Ms. Rivera explained that they needed a pianist for certain pieces, and May's sight-reading skills were exceptional. Besides, the teacher had added, "You've made quite an impression on the other students." It was true. May's performance had earned her a kind of respect she hadn't expected. She wasn't suddenly popular in the traditional sense, but people knew her name now. Students who had previously looked through her as if she were invisible now nodded in recognition when she passed them in the hallway, and then there was Zoe. Their cautious acquaintance had blossomed into genuine friendship, especially after Zoe's private lesson with Grandmother Lynn. The 2-hour session had left Zoe both exhausted and exhilarated. Your grandmother is terrifying, Zoe had declared afterward, flopping down on May's bed. She made me play the same 4 measures like 20 times until I got the phrasing exactly right. But then when I finally did it, it was like hearing it for the first time. May had smiled, all too familiar with her grandmother's teaching methods. That's how she is. Relentless until you get it right, and then you understand why it matters so much, Zoe had finished. I get it now. The doorbell's chime pulled May from her memories. She glanced at the clock, right on time. Zoe was nothing if not punctual. Coming, May called, closing the piano cover and hurrying to the door. Zoe stood on the porch, violin case in hand, wearing shorts and a t-shirt from the summer music camp they'd both attended the previous month. Ready for this? She asked, her eyes bright with excitement. As ready as I'll ever be, May replied, stepping aside to let her friend in. Grandmother's in the kitchen with my mom, finalizing the food for tonight. Tonight was special. Mr. Chen had arranged for a small recital at the community music school, featuring select students performing chamber music. He'd asked May and Zoe to play together, a violin and piano sonata they'd been working on all summer. It would be their first public performance as a duo. They found Grandmother Lynn and May's mother in the kitchen, surrounded by trays of dumplings and other traditional dishes. Just in time, Grandmother said, looking up from the pot she was stirring. Taste this, both of you. Tell me if it needs more ginger. The girls obediently tasted the soup, praising its flavor. May's mother smiled, watching them. The kitchen smelled of home. Not their old home or their new one, but something in between, a blend of past and present that felt just right. Now, go practice, Grandmother instructed, shooing them toward the living room. 1 hour before we leave for the recital. Focus on the transitions between sections. That's where the magic happens. May and Zoe set up in the living room, Zoe tuning her violin while May adjusted the piano bench. They had chosen Mozart's Violin Sonata in E minor, a piece that balanced technical challenges with beautiful melodies that showcased both instruments. As they began to play, May felt the familiar sense of connection that had developed between them over the months of practicing together. They breathed together, anticipated each other's slight shifts in tempo, and responded to each other's phrasing in a musical conversation that flowed naturally. From the kitchen, May could hear the occasional comment from her grandmother. More space between the phrases, Zoe. Or, May, listen to how she shapes that melody. But mostly, she let them work together without interruption. After running through the piece twice, they took a break. Zoe carefully set her violin in its case and flopped onto the couch. Do you ever think about how weird this is? She asked, staring at the ceiling. 6 months ago, we weren't even friends. I thought you were just this super quiet new girl, and now we're performing Mozart together. May finished, smiling. Life is strange. Do you remember the day of your audition? Zoe asked, turning to look at May. When I was kind of mean to you? May nodded. She hadn't forgotten, but the memory no longer stung the way it once had. I was jealous, Zoe admitted, even before I heard you play. There was something about you. This calmness, like you knew something the rest of us didn't. And then when you started playing, it all made sense. I was terrified that day, May confessed. My hands were shaking so badly I didn't think I'd be able to play at all. You couldn't tell, Zoe said. You looked like you belonged there, like the piano was just an extension of you. Before May could respond, her grandmother appeared in the doorway. Time to get ready, girls. A performer must never be late. The community music school's recital hall was small but elegant, with excellent acoustics and a beautifully maintained grand piano. As May and Zoe waited backstage with the other performers, May peeked through the curtains. The room was nearly full. Parents, teachers, students, and community members who supported the school. She spotted her family easily. Her father sat beside her grandmother, who was explaining something to Tao in a hushed voice. Her mother was speaking with Mr. Chen, probably thanking him for including May in the program. Nervous? Zoe whispered, adjusting her dress. May considered the question. 6 months ago, she would have been terrified. But now? Not really, she answered truthfully. Excited, Zoe grinned. Me too. They were scheduled to perform third in the program. May listened attentively to the first 2 performances, a flute and piano duo, followed by a string quartet of older students. Both received enthusiastic applause, then it was their turn. As they walked onto the stage, May caught her grandmother's eye. The slight nod she received communicated everything: confidence, pride, and the expectation of excellence. May sat at the piano, adjusting the bench as Zoe prepared her violin. They exchanged a glance, a silent count-in, and began. The music flowed between them, each phrase building on the last. May could feel the audience's attention, the collective breath as the music moved from the mysterious opening to the more hopeful middle section. She and Zoe responded to each other instinctively, like dancers who knew each other's next move. When they reached the final movement, with its quick, playful theme, May sensed rather than saw Zoe's smile. They pushed the tempo slightly, adding an energy that made the music feel spontaneous despite the hours of practice behind it. The final chords resonated through the hall, followed by that perfect moment of silence that comes when an audience is truly moved. Then came the applause, wholehearted and genuine. As they bowed, May saw her grandmother standing with the rest of the audience, her usually reserved expression replaced by open joy. Beside her, Tao was clapping so enthusiastically that he nearly hit the person next to him. Backstage, after the performance, Mr. Chen found them. Beautifully done, both of you, he said warmly. May, your grandmother must be very proud tonight. Thank you, sir, May replied, glowing with the success of the performance. I have a proposition for both of you, Mr. Chen continued. The community school is starting a youth chamber music program this fall. Weekly coaching sessions, regular performances. I'd like you two to be part of our first ensemble. Zoe gasped. Really? But those programs are usually for older students, aren't they? Usually, Mr. Chen agreed with a smile. But exceptions can be made for exceptional talents. Think about it and let me know. After he left, Zoe turned to May, eyes wide. Can you believe it? This is huge. May nodded, equally excited but somehow not surprised. Something in her had known, from the moment she sat down at the piano for her audition months ago. The music would open doors she hadn't even known existed. Later that night, after the reception and the congratulations, after Zoe had gone home and Tao had been put to bed, May sat with her grandmother on the porch swing. The summer air was warm, filled with the sound of crickets and distant traffic. You played well tonight, her grandmother said quietly. You listened to each other. Zoe makes it easy, May replied. She's a good violinist. Yes, but more importantly, you are good partners. You respect the music in each other. Her grandmother paused, looking up at the stars barely visible through the city lights. That is rare, May. Remember that. May nodded, understanding what her grandmother meant. Finding your voice was important, but finding someone who truly heard it, that was something special. I'm glad you came to live here, May said after a moment. Her grandmother smiled. So am I.